I always love bugs where it's some weird setup. Like there's you mentioned the screwdriver thing. It kind of reminds me of a bug that Baldur's Gate 3 had, where you could
Yeah.
skip 90% of the game by killing one of your party members, putting them in a box, and then lighting the box on fire. And for some reason, it would launch you to the final boss.
Oh, okay.
Because of course it would.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
naturally, that's.
it's
Oh
the
god,
exact set of circumstances that lead to the final boss.
yeah. I don't even want to think about the Baldur's Gate 3 devs and some of the stuff that they've probably had to try and
Yeah.
reproduce, or just like some of their playtesting. Like I will say, like that game, like I want to play it so bad just because
Me
of
too.
like hearing all the stories about people who are like, oh yeah, like I was on like this mission with Karlak, I did this, that, and the other, and then someone's like, who's Karlak? I never met that person. It's like, what?
Yeah,
It's
like
just, ugh.
there's a good reason why they decided there were certain things in D&D that just could not be put in that game. Like they could not add wish. Wish was not going to happen. Don't ask for it because that would be
yeah.
too much of a nightmare. There's already enough ways to break that game. They don't need that as well.
Oh yeah.
I think that's like any open world game at like any decent scale where you have to like venture and there's NPCs and quests and all that sort of stuff. It's like it is physically impossible to test everything.
Yeah.
And it only gets harder the bigger you go. So like it's funny when people like pick on Bethesda for like their sort of buggy experiences and, you know, chairs sticking through tables and all that sort of stuff. But then you think about like the scope of their games and how big and how much there is to do, and it's like, you know, I can forgive a chair being stuck in a table. I get to do this quest for 12 hours and, you know, have a heart-wrenching emotional story. The chair can be a bit messy.
Skyrim is a great example of a game that has like weird bugs that you have to just be stupid to go and try. Like, I think if you go to the Mage Guild or whatever it's called, and you walk up against a wall with a plate in front of your face, you can walk through some of the walls. Just like
Yeah. I remember watching someone. They weren't really speedrunning the game, but they knew a lot of speedrunning tactics for Skyrim. And I remember watching. Yeah, it was like. I think they condensed that part of the video down, but it was like 3 or 4 hours of like there is a very particular dungeon you go to for story reasons, but if you go to the back of it with like a basket or a bucket or something, you can like glitch yourself through the wall to pull the lever that's on the other side to then get into the dungeon to get some items or like to hit a quest marker that will then start you. And I was like, oh god.
Yeah, people would often do that because the way they handled shop or like vendor inventories is they just put a chest under the merchant. So you could just go and take everything from the chest if you worked out how to get out of the map. Some of those chests were not put in a proper location and did actually stick out of the terrain as well, so you could access them.
Yeah.
Like I think there was one in front of a cave somewhere that you could just access from the surface.
No, I remember doing that playing Starfield. It was like I can't remember what the planet was called. There's a very particular planet, and you go there, and like they like, you know, if it's not broken, why fix it? So they kept the same sort of inventory systems for the vendors. And I remember it's like, yeah, you walk into like the middle of town. There's like a muddy patch, and if you crouch and like look at a particular angle, you can get their inventory.
I like there is a lot of the bigger your game gets, the more challenges it's gonna have. This isn't just a game thing. This is a thing for just all software. The more things that you can mess around with in a program, the more ways it can break. There's this. I don't remember if it was an XKCD or some other comic, but it was about like testing a project. So if you're testing an input field, like a developer is going to test it with one A B C D E F G. They're going to test it with like random symbols and all of this other stuff, and then the user's going to come along and they're just going to pour water on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is the perfect analogy.
Yeah, like it's definitely a thing of like we sit there and, you know, we'll be like, okay, this system, this is how you input things into it, this is what we're expecting to get out. We test it, we're like, okay, that seems to work. You give it to like just anyone, and then it's like, I'm gonna put this into it. It's like, but you can't. You should only be able to put this in. But like, well, I did, and this is what I got out of it. And you're just like, that shouldn't work, but okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and having that freedom in VR, like, I, as you were saying before, I imagine it just adds like a bunch of weird variables. Like, you wouldn't have to worry about being able to pick up an item and stick it between a door if you're not in VR.
Yeah, no, that was
Mm.
like obviously like when we're going through and studying, a lot of it is more aimed towards like more traditional video games and things
Right.
like that. And so like they don't spend a whole bunch of time. Like I think all up we had like 5 weeks or something on the VR module that we went through. And it was very much so one of those things of like developing Project Nightlight, the like first project we made. That was one of the things that we had to really get our heads around. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that in traditional video games you can do. Like if you want to get the player's attention, you just grab that camera, face it towards where you want the player to look, and you're done. But like with VR, it's like, well, we can't move the camera. The camera is your head. If we move your head, you are gonna throw up. So like, yeah, it's even just some of the stuff of like, okay, we want the player to pay attention here. Okay, the level is gonna have to be, this, this, and this, and then you get to a hallway, so the player is looking forward, and then we can like pull off that thing. Um, I remember for Nightlight, there was a particular section where we wanted to have like a ghost or a shadow kind of walk in front of the player. So we were just kind of like, well, we can't just have that happen. Like we can't like turn the camera and make them look. So we had to like put in like specific hallways and stuff like that, just so we could be like, okay, let's have like that little like jump scary sort of thing happen. Because like we're hoping the player is looking this way. Like we definitely I do remember watching a couple people play it, and it's just like one of those things of like they're walking down the hallway, they like just decide, oh, let's like look at the wall for a second, and then it happens, and he's like, God damn it.
Or you have that one person who's like, I'm gonna go through this hallway looking backwards.
Yeah, I think we actually did have someone do something like that. Like they were getting kind of terrified of what was going on. And they were like, I see a dark hallway. I know where this is going. And then they were just like, I'm gonna walk through it backwards just to make sure. Oh. But yeah. No. Freedom in VR is great and horribly punishing as a developer. Because it's a lot more work to just be like, okay, we need to like steer the player, we need their attention here, so like we can't just do this. Now it's like a whole thing of like, get some spotlights, get something happening to draw their attention to it, and it's a lot more like just trying to get people's attention like in real life.